Welcome to the America the Beautiful for All Urban Parks and Green Space Work Group webinar on gray-green infrastructure, extreme heat, and school greening. My name is Joel Pinnell. I serve as the Vice President of Urban Forest Policy at American Forest, a board member of the Children in Nature Network, and I also have the privilege of serving as the co-lead of this work group. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So in keeping with practice of our work group, we are going to start with the land acknowledgement. And so I would like to acknowledge that the lands from which we are all gathered virtually today are the traditional and ancestral homelands of indigenous peoples who have cared for these places for countless generations. We recognize their enduring stewardship of the land, waters, and natural resources, and we honor their past, present, and future contributions to their communities and to this country. And as we discuss green schoolyards and the importance of connecting children with nature, we're reminded that learning has always extended well beyond classroom walls. And indigenous communities have long understood that the natural world is not only something to be protected, but also one of our greatest teachers. So hopefully today's conversation will inspire us to create places where every child can learn, play, and thrive while fostering a deeper connection to the land and to one another. So again, if you're joining us, please introduce yourself in the chat and where you're calling in from. And so our purpose in learning objectives for today is not only to highlight some inspiring projects. We have a great group of speakers who are going to tell you about awesome work that they're doing, but we also want you to leave with practical ideas, resources, and policy opportunities that you can take back into your own community. And specifically, we hope you'll leave with examples of successful green infrastructure and schoolyard projects, resources and best practices to help advance similar efforts locally, and a better understanding of how partnerships and public policy can help scale these investments and build healthier, cooler, and more resilient communities. And so now I want to hand it over to Kitty Craig of the Wilderness Society, just to give a brief overview of the America the Beautiful for All Coalition.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kitty Craig, and I pronounce her she, her. I'm located out here in the northwest of the lands of the Coast Salish, and I work as part of the Backbones, the Coalition, America the Beautiful for All Coalition's Backbone team, and I work also with the Wilderness Society by day. And the coalition, if you haven't heard of it, again, it was forged in 2022. Uniting organizations from the local to national level to work across missions, communities, cultures, and identities to advance an equity-centered vision for conservation in this country. And today we are about 350 organizations strong, so welcome. Our leaders represent perspectives from communities, lines, front lines of the nature loss crisis, and together reshape conservation policy through community-led solutions at the intersection of nature, justice, and health. We'd love to have you join us and join the movement. We have 7 active work groups. Joel mentioned this webinar is hosted by the Urban Parks and Green Space Work Group. But we've got 6 others. I'll drop the link to our website in the chat so you could check it out. But please check that out for more information. You can sign up for our newsletter. And you can also indicate your interest in the coalition. You can also reach out to me or Joel if you'd like more information. I'll also drop our contact information in the chat. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm really excited about the conversation.
Thank you so much, Kitty, and thank you for dropping the link in the chat. As you mentioned, this webinar is presented by the Urban Park and Green Space Work Group, and so we focus on the places where more than 80% of people live in this country, and where most of us experience nature in our daily lives. So that's neighborhood parks, urban and community forests, trails, shared public green spaces, and of course, schoolyards that we'll be talking about today. Also, as Katie mentioned, we are having a 4-part summer webinar series. This is the 3rd webinar in that series. And so in May, we started off talking about immigrant safety in outdoor spaces. Last month, we did a webinar on DEI language and values and outdoor equity. And all of these are available on YouTube. Today, we're going to talk about why these spaces matter and how communities can create create them through green infrastructure, schoolyard revitalization, partnerships, and policy. And next month, we will wrap up our webinar series by doing a deeper dive into state and local policies. And again, as Kitty mentioned, if we are welcoming and encouraging folks who want to engage to advance equitable access to urban parks and green space. And so you're welcome to join our group. Reach out to me, Kitty, our new co-host, Regional Carrillo of AZ Lands, or any of the work group members and participants that you may know. So today's webinar, we are delighted to have an amazing group of presenters. And so our conversation today really sits at the intersection of several important issues: extreme heat, public health, education, urban parks and green space, and community resilience. And so we often talk about these issues separately, but we all know that they're deeply connected. And so across the country, communities are experiencing hotter summers. I am calling in from just outside of Washington, D.C., where it was about 98 degrees yesterday. And so we know that heat affects everyone. However, it does not affect every neighborhood equally. In communities with fewer trees, less green space, more impervious surface, experience significantly higher temperatures, which increases health risks while also limiting opportunities to safely enjoy the outdoors. The encouraging news is that many of the solutions to these challenges already exist. And we know that trees, parks, green infrastructure, and green schoolyards don't just help cool neighborhoods, they improve public health, they reduce stormwater runoff, they increase academic achievement by supporting learning and mental well-being, and they expand access to the benefits of nature, in addition to strengthening biodiversity and creating welcoming public spaces that bring communities together. And so you're going to hear about some of this amazing work. I really like to think of these not just as projects, but investments in community infrastructure. They represent opportunities to advance multiple community priorities through single investments. And so green schoolyards are one of the best examples of this approach. And again, you're going to hear from an amazing panel today on some of the work that they're doing locally and nationally. And so we're going to begin with Danielle Russell from OpenLands, who will share a little bit about Chicago's nationally recognized Space to Grow program. We'll then hear from Trust for Public Land, who has a well-renowned national green schoolyard program and is also doing some work with a grant from the USDA Forest Service. And then we'll also hear from David Beard with the Children in Nature Network, who is going to connect some of those local examples to broader public policy and planning opportunities. And for our Q&A session, we'll also be joined by Allie McCarthy from Groundwork San Diego, who has a conflict right now, but she's going to bring another local perspective when we get to the Q&A section. So with that, again, I hope you are ready for our all-star cast of speakers, and I will turn it over to Danielle Russell from OpenLands.
Thank you. Good noon and good afternoon to all. I just want to share that just a moment of gratitude for being in this space with you all, with this amazing group of presenters, but also seeing some familiar names in the participant pool. And I just am grateful to see so many wonderful people who are doing amazing things for our planet, and just want to take that moment of gratitude since there's a lot of doom and gloom happening around us, but grateful to be amongst such great people. So I have the privilege of talking about the Space to Grow program, which is Chicago's Green Schoolyards program. So just want to hit on our programmatic goals of Space to Grow is that with our Green Schoolyards program, we're really focused on health and wellness, places where people can be active, outdoor learning and connection to nature, and also stormwater management, which is a very heavy component of our program. Want to shout out, I am representing an organization called OpenLands, and we're all about connecting people to nature where they are and restoring land and advancing environmental policy, and also our awesome co-partners Healthy Schools campaign, who believe in the common sense notion that Healthy students are then better learners and are all about advancing health policy and making sure that students have healthy schools. With that, we also have to shout out our capital funding partners. These are the folks that really make this happen financially, but also provide a lot of other technical support. Chicago Public Schools, the Department of Water Management of Chicago, the Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, and more recently, the Department of Environment. Thank you to them. And with that, just really quickly, all of these partners play an important piece of the puzzle that makes Space to Grow happen. So even with our capital partners, they're not just providing the funding for this. Chicago Public Schools, you can see they provide a lot of leadership with managing managing the maintenance over time as the property owner, making sure they're overseeing construction. Our water reclamation experts, we work with engineers that look at the designs for our schoolyards to make sure that they're designed to capture water effectively. Our Department of Water Management program, they are the ones that really run a flood risk analysis, which is really important for the selection of our schoolyards. And then our Department of Environment, they are convening and making sure that there's a lot of cohesive threads. And then with OpenLands and Healthy Schools campaign, we're the ones who are really kind of managing the program, seeing it through, making sure that schools are supported in the long term. We really fold under the Children in Nature Network's definition of a green schoolyard, that these have natural elements, community engagement is at the forefront, and that it's important that communities that have been historically underinvested are prioritized. So shout out to the Children in Nature Network, we love y'all. And thinking about green schoolyards, they're gonna look different everywhere. With our program, these are some of the elements that you might see. You might see vegetable gardens, you might see community meeting spaces and outdoor classrooms, places where people can gather, different types of play spaces, rain gardens, and other permeable surfaces, whether they might be a turf field or permeable pavement. Just really quickly, in our Chicago context, working with Chicago Public Schools, it's one of the largest districts in the country. So there's a lot of moving pieces with that. And thinking about our water situation, we are on Lake Michigan and we have many other waterways and watersheds going on around us. And we're also dealing with a combined sewer system, which is a lot of fun, where our wastewater and our rainwater are in the same place, which can often lead to overwhelming of those systems that will get into people's basements often and also flood the streets. And so what we're trying to do with Space to Grow is provide an opportunity for water to be captured where it is rather than overwhelming this system. And how we select schools is there is that criteria that I mentioned earlier, where we're looking at what communities are experiencing the highest risk of basement flooding, where is there a high priority need for a new playground or a playground renovation. And Chicago Public Schools also has an equity index that measures where investment is happening and where it's not. And so we can see where there's the most need. So with that being said, if you may know a little bit of the history of Chicago, the South and the West Sides are typically the most underinvested parts of our city. So that's typically where you'll see a Space to Grow schoolyard. We do have some outliers in the far north side and the far northwest side, and we're currently at 41 schoolyards, whoop whoop, with 4 currently being constructed right now. Community engagement is a major part of our program from the beginning, where These are spaces that are meant to be open to the community after school and on the weekends. So we want everybody's ideas, and we want to make sure that people are engaged from the beginning. So what that looks like is we provide multiple opportunities for people to share their feedback, whether it's visual, written, having conversations with people. We want to be mindful that people have different ways of receiving information. People have different ways of expressing themselves. And so we want to meet people where they are at as much as we can. And we also want to be aware of potential power dynamics. Sometimes in community meetings, there can be someone who might be the loudest person in the room, and just being mindful of that and trying to develop relationships early and consistently. And just real quick, what that also looks like is we have we'll do photo surveys. We'll ask people questions about what they like about their space and what they'd like to change. We ask people, how are they using the space now? Where do you walk to and from class? Yeah, just really trying to see what the space means to people right now and what they want it to be. So just some before and after shots. This is Cook on the south side in Auburn Gresham. You can see this large pooling of water here that has transformed into a more vibrant space with no pooling water, which we're very excited about. They used to call that pond Lake Cook, and Lake Cook is gone. Yay. This is Nathan Davis on the southwest side. We've also done a lot of tree planting with this school. This is Grisham and Hegewisch on the east side, where there's been a lot of environmental injustice burden on this school. You can see a lot of trees, permeable surfaces, and native gardens. And I just want to add, in Chicago, we like to plant our native prairie plants that have really long roots. They can get up to 15 feet long, and they create all these little pathways that make it easier for water to trickle through. This is Ryder, and just in the theme of heat, just want to add that this was one of the first schools that we've added a pretty large shade structure. It's kind of hard to see, but it's near the basketball court. And that's just something that we've really been trying to incorporate more. Is we plant trees, but they can take a little bit of time. And so just wanting to be mindful of the community's requests. And we work with the schools to activate these spaces in different ways. It's important that we're engaging students in the connection of their schoolyard and their space and nature, and trying to get all the kids outside planting in the native garden, getting them to be a part of the construction of this, which is often one of the final finishing touches. We've done some stormwater workshops with community members and learning about how they can implement community stormwater management practices. There's also these activities of engaging parents in their gardens with cooking and growing food, and different volunteer days. And we also train all of the teachers to help them become as comfortable as possible with utilizing the space as an extension of the classroom. So just a little bit about some impact. As I mentioned, we have 41 schoolyards so far, which translates to 8.7 million gallons of stormwater storage volume and almost 2 million square feet of area transformed. Grateful to have been working with thousands of parents and community members in the design and stewardship of this, and almost over 10,000 students engaged in the garden, over 1,000 teachers trained, and just being able to provide more opportunities for people to play and be active. We did do a study a while back on how people are utilizing these spaces, and we did find that across all ages and genders, there's more physical activity happening. more positive social interaction, so less bullying on the schoolyard when people have more things to do and think more things to interact with. It creates a more positive experience. And we've also found that these spaces bring people in the community together, where neighbors are meeting each other, staff members are reporting higher satisfaction with their employment, which is really positive to hear. And we have a 10-year impact report there if anyone is of interest. And just want to share some of the things that we've learned. Definitely maintenance is at the top, and we've come a long way with our maintenance where we've been able to work with Chicago Public Schools to identify a partner that they have paid for, which is we think is important, that does monthly maintenance on schoolyards with weeding, maintenance of turf fields, and other things that we really want the schools to be enjoying these spaces and stewardship to be a positive experience rather than a burden. So that's been very helpful. And especially because a lot of green infrastructure requires specialized care. As I mentioned, we've been trying to be more intentional about designing with heat in mind, definitely planting trees, but also other shade structures, and also designing with gender in mind. So keeping in mind that oftentimes girls have different ways of playing than boys, and so making sure that there's spaces for them as well. And we're always learning, so yes. And with that said, oh, I guess I was the only one that presented, sorry. Thank you so much, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Danielle. So one thing is, Kitty put in the chat, if you do have questions for any of the individual presenters, please put them in the chat. And after all of the presentations, we will move to Q&A. And secondly, I thought it was really cool. I saw that Priya from Children in Nature Network, who directs their Green Schoolyard program, mentioned that their approach was inspired by OpenLands. And so, and Danielle Russell, you mentioned how you sort of took from Children in Nature Network. So I think it's just really cool that, these innovative approaches that are happening and implemented at the local level can then inspire sort of national strategies. And then through national networks and through convenings like this, we can just spread and replicate and scale those. And so I think that's really cool to see. And so now we will hear from another Danielle, and she will talk about some of the work that the Trust for Public Land is doing both locally and nationally. So we'll turn it over to you, Danielle.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Danielle Russell, for your inspiring presentation. It's beautiful to hear about your wonderful work in Chicago. And yeah, it's definitely a model, one that resonates for me relative to our work in New York and our work in Philadelphia. So I'm really excited by your presentation. Thank you. I'll share my screen. Hopefully that'll work for everyone. That's seeing all my tabs. Oh, there we go. And it is working. Okay. So yeah, so I'm with the Trust for Public Land. And for many of you, you might not know of us. If you do, we're a national nonprofit working to really make sure that everybody has the chance to enjoy the outdoors. And so our work can look very similar to this image, where we're working on land conservation efforts and helping people connect with the wildlands around them. In urban areas, it often looks like park creation and schoolyard transformations. And then, of course, we're also building trails and helping to activate and conserve the trail land so that it's protected and well enjoyed. But this image I wanted to just lift up because, this isn't a schoolyard. But if we can make sure that everybody, every student in this country feels like nature is theirs, and by the schoolyard greening that's around them, then the chance for them to go out and connect with the wildlands becomes sort of second nature. And so that's the kind of long-term vision, is that this can be for everyone. Click through. But today, 1 in 3 children and 1 in 3 people across the country, including 28 million children, do not have access to a park within a 10-minute walk of home. And you further overlay the fact that children are spending more than 7 hours on screens. So there's a lot that we need to solve for as we think about what's in front of us. And what's often in front of us is a schoolyard in every single community that looks a little bit more like a prison yard, paved over, surrounded by chain link fencing, not really sharing the message of joy and connection and outdoors. So it's really no wonder that children aren't growing up feeling like nature is theirs if this is what they experience every single day. That's contributing to low activity levels. It's contributing to isolation from each other. And we're seeing this increase in mental health risks and obesity levels, poor health among our children, and we really need to be doing better. So we think about the schoolyards as this opportunity as a health intervention, right? And Danielle talked about this, and Joel talked about this, that by greening schoolyards, you're providing that opportunity for safer environmental learning all around them, but also slowing down the stormwater, capturing heat so it doesn't heat up the school, it doesn't heat up the children, connections to fresh food, and those opportunities to connect with each other. So when you think about the physical activity level, we did a study of our schoolyards in New York City, and we found that it was a 3 times increase in physical activity levels before and after the schoolyard renovation. And I think everybody's heard about the impacts that greening has on cortisol levels. And so we're really looking at this as a health intervention. And then beyond that, we think about the impacts of this asphalt, right? This asphalt that's in schoolyards all around us, it's heating things up. The temperature differential in a school and like a heat island area can be extreme. We're finding that 75% of schools are in a heat island. And so that's just reinforcing this uncomfortable situation that we're now all facing with climate change. We know we can do better. We also see flooding. As Danielle mentioned, these schoolyards are flooding. They're contributing to combined sewer overflows. They're really not doing a lot for the surrounding communities. So again, thinking about that transformation as an opportunity to do better. And so this before and after kind of shows you, again, you build this giant schoolyard that's also a sponge. It's a place for outdoor learning. The image on the right is actually a rain garden that doubles as a beautiful environmental outdoor classroom. Together across the country, through some analysis, we figure that we can actually reduce the carbon avoidance by 10 million megatons. And just looking at the schoolyard work just in New York alone over the years, those schoolyards are managing 100 million gallons of stormwater every single year. So there's measurable outcomes that have very important bottom line impacts on climate change. And this is something that we are really interested, everybody I think on this call is really interested in turning into the norm. So we also think about the fact that parks, especially parks serving community of color, are half the size and 40% more crowded. And so there's a real equity divide when it comes to who has access to green space and what that green space looks like. So again, the schoolyards, because they exist in every community, become this wonderful opportunity to meet people where they are and provide the greening and the beautiful joy that comes with having a space that really reflects what the community wants. And you think about schoolyards in some settings, and they might be green, they might be covered in lawn, they might even have tree canopy, but they're not really designed in such a way to invite students out and to really program for educational outcomes. So this schoolyard in Atlanta took that kind of canvas, that blank canvas of green space, and started to activate it with places to learn outside and to play and to really build those connections with each other. I also love the story of the schoolyard right over here in the corner, where we're conserving forested land directly adjacent to schools. So those teachers and those educators are taking kids out in any weather, and it becomes this wonderful outdoor forested schoolyard that they can then enjoy. So there's so many different ways to think about what the schoolyard before and after can look like, but the fact is that everybody should be really thinking about that. Of course, we know there's barriers, but to the impacts, TPL sees the impacts of schoolyards from the health lens, from the climate lens, from the equity lens, really all throughout, the learning lens and community. And so taken together, these schoolyards, if they become the standard, introduce thriving, resilient, just, educated, empowered communities. And who wouldn't want that, right? So we have a tool we can all use. And it's pretty wonderful to think about the process. And I think similarly to what we learned about the Spaces to Grow program, in many places where we're working around the country, schoolyards continue to be transformed through the voices of the community and especially the voices of the students. So when we do the work, we think about it as an outdoor, basically an experimental learning opportunity, project-based learning opportunity where students are learning about the climate challenges that their community faces. They're going out on field trips and experiencing green infrastructure. They're coming back and making critical decisions about where trees will provide shade. And then they are the ones that introduce this concept to the community. They're the ones that take the leadership. And so at the end of the day, that ownership and that sense of pride becomes not only a marker of how that transformed space looks, but it also is a marker for those students to carry forward as they continue on their path to make our communities more resilient. So it's really wonderful. And then after the opening, we don't see the work as just being cut and done. It also includes this wonderful opportunity for stewardship and outdoor learning. And so our relationships with school districts continue years and years into the future. And so we've been doing this work for about 30 years and across the country. So right now, Trust for Public Land is actively working in 26 states, including Washington, D.C. And I think one of the exciting things for us to think about is how can we take this entire opportunity and take it across the country so every single state can have a schoolyard that's green, that's beautiful, that's welcoming, that reflects their needs and also becomes the foundation for really important policy to be built on. Because as we think about making this the standard, we know it's not just about creating those spaces, but it's about really expanding the evidence base of impact. So everyone understands that these schoolyards are not just a physical transformation, but they are really an educational, a learning, a health, and a climate intervention. And then beyond that, of course, and I think relative to this group, we need to advocate together to lift up our voices and really look for the policy opportunities that can unlock funding and also pave the way, or de-pave the way for enabling policy. And I know David's going to talk more about that. And then beyond that, it's trying to kind of share what we've all learned in doing this work with everybody, especially school districts who hold these spaces so that they have what they need to make this happen without all the extra support coming from the nonprofits. In the ideal world, I think I would be working myself out of a job if this is going to scale, and I'm okay with that. So one thing I wanted to talk about really quickly is the Forest and Community Schoolyards program. So Trust for Public Land is very honored to be in partnership with the USDA Forest Service under their Urban and Community Forestry program. And this is really, Forest and Community Schoolyards is a wonderful way to bring funding directly to the communities and have them lead in doing the work. So we're working with 37 partners, and they're advancing tree planting and tree care, environmental education, and workforce development at their schools. And what we see this as a real important way to, think about place keeping as a practice. So thinking about the past, present, and the future. What do trees and tree canopy do for the ancestral stories of our partners? We have 22 tribal partners in our community, and we've learned so much from them. And are learning also like that relationality and the kind of connection to the land that having increased tree canopy and increased natural medicinal plants is really providing, and which taps into traditional sovereignty, of course, but it also taps into indigenous languages, which is so important. So some of the things that are happening, there's just a variety of activities. We're seeing medicine forests, medicine wheels, powwows and traditional games. There's seed banks and seed saving. There's native trees, of course, and plant nurseries that come with it. Ceremonial spaces and ceremonies are brought out because of this work, including traditional structures, which is really wonderful. Outdoor classrooms, nature exploration areas, of course, and some crafts and things that are able to really have a new life because their trees are nearby. So what does sword making look like in the Menominee Nation? The basket weaving that's happening in some communities, canoe carving and creating hand drums. So it's a wonderful way to invest in the practice of the cultures that are so deeply connected to plants to begin with. Right, so here is some work that's happening at the Tyospazina Tribal School. This is a BIE school up in South Dakota, and the partners there are working on making teepees. They're doing some planting. They're doing assessments to figure out where do they want to plant the trees around their recreation spaces to provide shade. They're doing soil investigations. They're really understanding the kinds of plants that will go in. And so this learning opportunity that comes alongside the Forest and Community Schoolyards program, really any schoolyard program, is quite wonderful. And I guess I'll just leave it with the question of, how can we all work together to shift the policy so this doesn't have to be something that we talk about as a nice to have, but really become something that's standardized. So thank you all for making time, and I will turn it over.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. You said so many things that resonated, as did Danielle Russell. But one thing that really stuck with me is the sense of agency that you're giving students and young people, and not just having spaces that are designed for them, but they're actually creating. And so I think that is just so powerful. That's how we are going to obviously have the next generation of stewards, not just for community schoolyards, but for our environment and green spaces as a whole. And so you did a great job in your presentation, also sort of naturally transitioning to David. So David Beer with Children in Nature Network, who is going to talk a little bit about public policy, which is the realm I deal in mostly, and how we can really scale and replicate these efforts across the country. So I'll turn it over to you, David.
Thanks. And I see we have the same stylist. Everyone, good afternoon. I'm David Beard. I'm with Children in Nature Network. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Affairs. I am in Kirkland, Washington. You may know Kirkland's signature. That is us. I am in the land of the Duwamish and Coast Salish peoples. Very excited to talk about public policy and systems change. So we've heard some great pieces from the Danielles about local work, what it looks like, why it's important. And so now how do we use some public policy and public sector levers to accelerate change faster? So that's what I'm going to chat a little bit about today. So I will share my, oops, not that presentation. I will share my screen here. There we go. All right. Um, there are many partners in this work in public policy on this issue. I just wanted to highlight right now, because I'm going to be talking about the federal Revitalizing America's Schoolyards Act legislation. And these three organizations and this other coalition are the primary workhorses, we'll say, behind it. But there's a myriad of organizations working on this. And so just excited to be facilitating this work with Green Schoolyards America, TPL, and the Outdoor Alliance for Kids Coalition. So Children in Nature Network is a national organization that supports access to nature through a variety of strategies, communications, research, public policy. I want to note our benefits wheel and our Green Schoolyards toolkit that comes with that can help both with planning actual green schoolyards, but also with public policy and communicating the importance of green schoolyards and school greening. So we'll just give a little bit of overview of what this is looking like in public policy at all levels of government, local, state, and federal, how that impacts public planning and how you can utilize green schoolyards as a tool in different public plans, state level policy, what we're seeing just starting to happen in a few states, and would love to help with movement in other states, and then finally ending out with federal action and a call to action. So as we think about policy, we often think about we tend to just think about passing a bill, which is really important, and or funding. Actually, probably funding and then passing a bill, which are really important. But I want to underscore the importance of public planning, and there are all kinds of public planning documents out there. And green schoolyards can show up in many of them as a tool for climate change, as a tool for education, as a tool for outdoor recreation, as a tool for stormwater or other public infrastructure management. And oftentimes, this tool can lead to public policy changes or can lead to funding decisions. Sometimes that means this is a tool to help with a certain initiative in a budget, whether it's a school district budget or your county or city budget. But it can also help drive levies and millages around the country too, where voters are actually deciding on how public dollars are spent. So there's all sorts of creative things we've seen around the country, whether that's Boise and their climate action plan, whether that's the millage in Grand Rapids, Michigan, whether that is even in early childhood, although we talk about green schoolyards, increasingly early childhood is happening at school buildings and in school districts. So how do we get that built into school district plans as well? So just want to give you a few ideas here of where they are or could I will admit, not all these have examples yet, but they could wind up in many of these public plans. Some things that we don't always think about are the schools themselves and their future planning. So their STEM related plans, their next gen science standards, green schoolyards really help bring to life STEM. And I would argue, particularly for those kids that are not necessarily inclined to engage or be interested in STEM, why not put this in STEM to make these things seem more real for kids, particularly today who have such a disconnect with nature. And anyone that's worked in a school garden can tell you when kids actually get to grow something and put their hands in the dirt, it changes something in their brain and their orientation to nature. So embedding that in a STEM plan and green schoolyards can be a really great idea. Facility planning, I think as anyone that's worked in this can tell you, one of the biggest, we'll be positive here. One of the biggest I don't say challenges because that sounds so negative, but think about if you are running a school facility, school grounds, and the challenges that come with that and the limited support that those folks have to do it. Building this into facility plans over time and really bringing along your school or district facilities folks is really important. Capital bonds and levy plans for school districts. There's all sorts of ways to look down the road and do long-term planning. And I mean, our overall goal is every school, every single solitary school has a green schoolyard. It's just how we do schoolyards. That's our ultimate goal. So building those in ahead of time into these different plans can be really critical. Park levies and millages. Many communities around the country, voters actually vote on park levies and millages. So having those built in, like what they did in Grand Rapids, is a really great idea for more sustainable funding. Climate and sustainability related plans. We've worked, and I know many of our partners have worked to try and get this in as a climate change lever, how we can blunt impacts, how we can manage impacts, how we deal with increasingly erratic weather. I know many of you are under smoke right now, as we talked about here in the Puget Sound today. We've had wild thunderstorms, and is it climate related or not? I guess I don't know about today, but I'll tell you, we are having really strange weather this last decade, really, and so green schoolyards can support that, given that schoolyards are one of the biggest pieces of publicly owned types of land in the country. And finally, infrastructure improvement plans. And when you really do a full scale green schoolyard, you often can build in other benefits like stormwater management is the one that like Milwaukee, for instance, that actually has partnered with the public agency that oversees stormwater management, has even used a stormwater fee mechanism to help fund their schoolyards there in Milwaukee. So, there's always needs for improvements, and why not factor those into how you build green schoolyards? So, public plans are a great way to start seeding green schoolyards and/or down the road, even paying for and managing green schoolyards. Now, coming up a bit to state policy, we have seen action in several states over the past couple of years to provide funding and support our pilots for green schoolyards and school greening. California had the first urban community forest grant program, which not only has funding for schools, but also has funding for childcare centers as well, licensed centers. So that was really exciting to see. And the second state now is Colorado and the Community Schoolyards Grant Program there, which prioritizes underserved communities and has grants both for not just for implementation, but also for planning, which is great. And then Georgia just this year finalized an outdoor learning spaces pilot project. So it's great to see a red-leaning state see some progress on this issue. This is not just a blue state or blue idea issue. Green schoolyards are happening everywhere, including in Houston. We're working with folks in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. This can happen everywhere, and it's great to see many different kinds of states and many different parts of the country starting to see action. There have also been discussions of green schoolyards in states like Michigan, where they have considered potentially moving a proposal. Here in my state of Washington, there's been some discussion as well. So would love to see this state level work grow. And we have some proof points now to move this work along. And now to the top level, the federal level. I'm under no guise of the wildness of our federal government right now. But the feds are always obviously going to play a really important role in any public policy, even if that's being an air horn, that people should pay attention to the issue, excuse me, all the way up to hopefully funding and providing support for green schoolyards. And right now, we are at the point of utilizing the federal government to get loud about the issue. And we are really excited to see the Revitalizing America's Schoolyards Act get introduced for the first time in both the House and the Senate. So we have two bills that are live right now. Representative Barbara Lee in Pennsylvania has championed the House bill, Senator Mark Heinrich in New Mexico, the Senate bill. We have many co-sponsors now on the House bill. So when we're looking for new ones, and I'll touch on that in a moment. What this bill would do is create a grant program for revitalized schoolyards. And grants would be it would be competitive. Grants would help with planning, implementation, and operations of green schoolyards. It also includes support for best practices and making sure that there is a repository for this information nationally. Obviously, we have Green Schoolyards America, TPL, Children in Nature Network, and other partners that house this work now. But to have the connection to the federal government really helps communities understand that this is important and really a measure that our federal government cares about. And so we really see that piece of this bill being important. And where we're at right now with the bill is wanting to get loud about it. I'll be frank, we don't expect the bill to pass in this Congress. I think, as we all know, getting anything done in this Congress is damn near impossible. And we are looking towards next Congress and reintroducing these bills as early in the new Congress as possible. The new Congress will be seated in January. And we really hope for, at that point, to be able to move this bill down the road. It may be a marker bill, which is a bill that gets sort of merged into a larger bill. That's very possible. And we're working with other coalitions and other kinds of partners out there to see that happens. But right now, we just need our members of Congress and their staff to know about these bills, to know about why green schoolyards matter, to know that it has many of the interests of our government can be met by green schoolyards, and now is the time to do that. I don't know if you can put in chat, but I do have a link to some links to a toolkit which provides information on reaching out to members of Congress and their staff, some social media posts that you could consider, and then doing site visits. We really want our members of Congress to get out to sites and see what they are, what they look like, and why they're important. If you, oops, there we go. You can see here, these were site visits with our champions, Barbara Lee's office. There on the left hand of your screen, you can see what it used to look like and where they're at now. They're in Pennsylvania. I know TPL was leading that work. In New Mexico, this is a green schoolyards in the Albuquerque area at a middle school, I believe. A lot of attention is paid towards elementary schools. We're really hoping to grow the middle and high school space as well. But these sorts of site visits help not only build knowledge for policymakers, but build support. So we are right now working to make those happen. And if anyone is interested in doing those, we would love to would love to talk to you to consider your member of Congress and their staff bringing them out to see what these look like. So we also have some action alerts. Oak, the Outdoor Alliance for Kids, as well as TPL, have some links to that, so that you could just directly send a note to your member of Congress. And we would love to have to come out and support you, or to support you virtually if you're interested in doing that. And then just helping bring knowledge to the issue. Even if you do nothing else but share information about what green schoolyards are and why they matter right now, that's really going to help move this message. And we are here anytime to chat with you. And I know we're going to move into Q&A. So if you have any questions about this bill, or where we're at in advocacy, or any other questions about state or local policy, I'm happy to answer them now, or I'll put my email in chat as well if you ever want to talk more about what's happening or could happen where you are.
Thank you so much, David. As I promised, Rockstar group of presenters, two Danielles and David, we are actually a little bit ahead of schedule. So Allie from Groundworks should be joining us at the top of the hour. I wanted to bring her into the guided questions. So maybe we can open it up for some audience questions. Now, if you have questions that were either in the chat or specific questions for any of the three presenters, um, please highlight that and we can move to those questions, and then we will bring Ali into the guided question. And while folks are thinking of questions or while we look at the chat, I do want to share just like a personal anecdote is that my youngest daughter had her 11-year-old checkup today, 1 o'clock, and the doctor asked, how much screen time is she doing a day? And I'm just like, too much. It's too. Yeah, I'm guilty as a parent of allowing probably a little bit too much screen time. But she said, we are recommending at least an hour a day outside, which is higher than what I have heard from other doctors and what I've seen. So yeah, I was very encouraged by that. And then I also just thought as well, I have the privilege of having a trail directly behind my house. Like if my daughter will make the choice to go outside, it's a relatively easy choice. We just kind of get lazy as parents sometimes. But I think about all the kids who it's not an easy choice to get outside, right? And you think about I think public schools manage something like 2 million acres of land. I may be off on that, but just an amazing amount of land, all the concrete and asphalt is out there. So kids want to be outside in their nature, most kids. And so I think I'm just reminded of all of this work is helping make the healthy choice the easy choice in terms of getting outside. And so, again, virtual round of applause for our three speakers, all of the amazing work and the scale of work that you're doing across the country, in Chicago and across the country is just amazing and very inspiring. All of the links should be in the chat for the various resources that they've shared. And so with that, Kitty, if you could help me out a little bit, maybe we do 5 minutes of audience Q&A before we move into the guided questions, where I'm hoping that Ali from Groundwork San Diego will be joining us.
Great, thanks, Joel. Yes, so we don't have any questions in the Q&A channel yet, and I haven't seen any dropped in the chat. So if anybody does have a question, please drop it in the chat. I think I can also, you could raise your hand and I can have you come off mute and I can bring you into the conversation that way too. So we can wait a second here if there's any pressing questions, or we could shift to one of our guided questions, Joel, if we'd like as well, to kind of get folks warmed up.
Yeah, I'll give folks a second. And I see a hand
Oh,
up. Is that what
yeah.
I'm seeing? Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's see. I'll unmute you, Vanessa. You should be able to talk here. Thanks.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you so much. I'm totally loving the schoolyards that I'm seeing. We have a plan here in Philadelphia at Overbrook Environmental Education Center to revamp the other half of our 2 acres we just received. Is it the EPA Cert 3? We were at Brownsville and we're cleared, ready to go. We removed, we did not cover, and that took 20 something years. But Mr. Shabazz has done a wonderful job and we're so proud of him and his wife and what they've invested in West Philadelphia. Now we're about to make it beautiful. So I was just looking at some of your plans at the schoolyards. I used to be a bicycle coach. Have any of you all added like stationary bikes because they're excellent for cardio? Has anyone thought of adding something like that to their schoolyards? Just as a former bike coach, I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I love that, Vanessa. And thank you for the shout out from West Philadelphia. I spent 20 years there, raised my kids there, and it's a wonderful place. So I love what you're doing at Overbrook Environmental Center. We did the work over in the Anderson School, so that's right by. But yeah, we have done some stationary bikes in Camden, actually, because they were adjacent to the circuit trail. And so, it's a great way to get that exposure for both the students and the adults. So it's a really, and then recently I was at a schoolyard in New York, and they have a whole fitness zone. And one of our school champions, who's a rising 9th grader, was talking about the importance of the stationary bikes and his design of them. And so, yeah, it's a really good call out.
And great, Joel, we do have, oh, David, you were about to talk. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, I was going to kind of weave in Emily's question here because it's kind of related, and not necessarily about bikes per se, but it is about thinking about the space more dynamically. That's what another thing I love about Green Schoolyard. There's so many benefits, but also just many schools don't have any nature nearby or that it's been totally torn out. Some schools actually do have nature nearby and don't utilize it and ban kids from going to, and it is that clear, stark line. And one of my favorite memories was actually going to Grand Rapids, and I got got to see like four of their green schoolyards, and one of them was right really close to this creek and this beautiful trees and everything. And up until they really started this work about 5 or 6 years ago, they never utilized it. And I believe there was a fence up to stop the kids from going there. And when we talked to the facilities management, we talked to the principal about all the dynamic uses that they have made since they turned it into a green schoolyards. One of which is they put little learning posts along the trail so they can learn different things about what they're seeing, which was amazing. Another one, I asked them about students with disabilities. This was an elementary school, and she said, well, they use it for learning activities like they would any kid, but they also use it as a de-escalation tactic. So when a kid, particularly a kid that may be having challenges with autism or just expressing themselves and they're getting really worked up, she says she couldn't believe the change of when you just take a kid out for 5 minutes. And of course, you have to have the staffing and the paras and all that to be able to do that. But it just to hear how that was supporting her students in a way that I hadn't necessarily thought about, I thought that was just so cool. So when you mentioned bikes, it's just thinking about all the dynamic ways that you can utilize the green schoolyards is so important. And I know we'll get to this question, but I saw it in Q&A, but how to engage youth in the design. And I think we'll get to that. I know TPL is a process for that, but helping them tell you what are the cool ways you can use it. Maybe I'll just tee that up for the next conversation. But that one really struck me as a great memory.
I'll hop in on the memory train. So I joined OpenLands through way of Public Allies, the AmeriCorps program. Not by choice. I was very interested in restorative justice and like a certain idea that I had about youth engagement. And so when I was told that I was going to be working on a stormwater management program, I was pretty grossed out because I didn't know what that was. And it sounded sewery. And I was like, that does not sound like a peace circle. No, thank you. But my first day working at OpenLands, I was planting in a rain garden with children I actually already knew. It was very serendipitous. I had been working with those kids for about 3 years, and they had like various behavioral issues and learning challenges. And so I was like, I'm not sure how it's gonna go having these kids outside. Because I remember one of those children, I would be like really trying to get to focus, you know? And that child that I would be like chasing up and down the stairs, trying to get him to read in the garden, he was so focused on planting his plants to the point where I thought something was wrong. And I was just like, are you okay? And that really clicked something for me, where then almost every time we would be planting with kids and we're coming in for the first time, we don't know these children. Teachers would come to us and say, like, oh, that's the student I have the most difficulties with, like, look at them go, you know, and at this point, I'm not even surprised anymore. And so, yeah, that really shifted my own career path, being able to see that, witness that transformation happening with children.
I love that, Danielle. And just piling on, we did look at some case studies where we saw reports over and over again from teachers that their student that was the most kind of ramped up in the classroom would go outside and just really connect and calm down. And so we wanted to understand, is this something that's a trend? And, you know, especially after one school in Philadelphia that had a suspension rate of 40 per year. And then after the schoolyard, it went to 0 and stayed at 0. And we're like, there's something going on here. And so we've been working with researchers, and the published study is not released yet, But they're seeing a trend across both Philadelphia and New York City that the suspension rates are decreasing by as much as 8% across the board. And so it becomes this really important behavioral intervention for educators to really think about, in addition to everything else we named. And then Rachel has a great question in here that has to do with maintenance. I would say that maintenance is probably one of the biggest barriers to schoolyard greening. And the facts are that rests really upon the fact that schools are just underfunded across the board. And so teachers are doing everything they can, educators, principals, the whole gamut. They're leaning in and they're trying their best to work with limited resources. And so sometimes when a schoolyard is greened and renovated with all these beautiful amenities, and it's not really considered through the lens of also maintenance, it can actually become a burden. And so we need to make sure that we're meeting the communities where they are with their maintenance capacity, nudging what we can, but advocating at the same time that there needs to be more funding for maintenance. And so in New York City, where this work has been, so successful at scale with over 240 schoolyards, they've been able to advocate for maintenance as part of the, continuing funding that comes for this program. So they're able to pay for custodians to come and open the schoolyard and close it down after hours and do that extra level of support that is needed. But in addition to that, it's about designing for the maintenance a school has or can adjust to, and also making sure that there's stewardship support, teacher support, training, and curricula that take learning outside and then bring community into the space so that it feels like it's theirs as well. So it's a multi-pronged answer, but we found that doing everything carefully has actually worked and can be an example that can overcome the barrier that I'm not going to do it because of maintenance issues. You can do it.
Awesome testament to the power of this work. And I'm not seeing Allie join us yet, so we'll go ahead and move into the
I'm
guided.
here.
Oh,
Allie is here, Joel. Yeah.
perfect timing. We'll move into the guided questions now, and I did want to Danielle Russell, your story, just real quickly, is very similar to when the urban and community forestry funding that Danielle Dank mentioned that TPL is implementing. Senator Cory Booker was the biggest champion for that funding in the Ag Committee. And so I was able to attend the announcement of that funding in Newark. And he said, when I became mayor of Newark, I did not think that these I wanted to work on criminal justice reform. I wanted to work on economic reform. I wanted to work on public health. And he said, I realized I couldn't do any of that when so many people in our neighborhoods were just living in unhealthy environments. And so that's how he became such a big champion for urban greening. So your story resonated with that. Like, this work just touches on so many things. And so you can be coming at it from a public health lens or academic lens and student achievement or mental health. There's so many different aspects of it, but it's all related, and it really is, it's not a silver bullet, but one single investment can address so many challenges that communities are facing. So with that, we'll move into our guided section portion. Allie McCarthy has joined us from Groundwork USA San Diego. And so thank you so much. I know she was raising money and doing a bunch of other important things before joining us, but wanted to sort of loop you in. And at first, I'll just give you a moment. Is there anything you wanted to add on your perspective, some of the challenges and successes you've had implementing this work in San Diego? We could start there.
Yeah, I'd love to share, if I can, just a quick example of a pilot project that Groundwork San Diego is leading right now in partnership with the school district. And so we are piloting going through the San Diego Unified School District self-help program, where we're bringing external funding as a nonprofit that works in the Choice Creek watershed in southeastern San Diego to bring external funding for piloting green schoolyards while we work on the challenges of districts updating their standard materials lists and their maintenance programming and different things like that. So this is the Choice Mead Elementary Green Schoolyard pilot, and it's a really interesting school site. Oh, geez. It is on the edge of the 805 freeway here. These two fields are supposed to be joint use fields. So the city of San Diego comes and mows these fields once a week or something like that. And as a joint use field, it's a partnership between the City of San Diego Parks and Recreation Department and San Diego Unified School District. So there's a double gate where the community, it's not currently active, but where the community can access these two grass fields after hours, after school hours. And so the circle part here is our proposed footprint project. So we are going to tear up this asphalt and playground and replace it with a shaded nature play site. So I just sort of wanted to walk you through a little bit of what we have been looking at. And then as I hopped on, I heard folks talking about schools not having access to nature spaces. In San Diego, we have an interesting to topography where a lot of our schools are actually on the edges of canyons. And so this number 7, this existing play field was actually the edge of the canyon. And then they sort of, when they built the school, destroyed the edge of the canyon and filled it in and made it a grass field. And so we have an idea of piloting a canyon to campus project as well with the schools around that are on the edges. And so the San Diego Unified School District actually owns a portion of this canyon space. And so there's some interesting opportunities here if we can get without throwing the district under the bus here. I do know that there are real bureaucratic and regulatory challenges and cost challenges to this. But if we can be thinking about framing it from everything from fire resilience, if this canyon were to catch on fire and hasn't been properly restored or has full of invasive species. So lots of different things to consider and asking the school district to think big picture wise. But here's the initial plan here is that we would take this edge of the playground and turn it into a nature play. And then later on, extend that into where the field is and do a perimeter trail that incorporates activating the canyon as educational and pedagogical spaces. And so one of the ways that we're doing this is talking to the teachers and getting them involved for, like you guys were talking about, the uses. And so in some of our preparation, we did learn from the PE teachers and some of the special education teachers ed specialists that this area where it says phase 3, this is a hillside where there's a lot of eloper special needs students that love to come and watch the trolley that goes through here. And so this is like a popular place where the kids will run off to if they can get to it, if they're out on the field. And so thinking about bringing uses for those emotional regulation walks and getting the students out of the classroom to do hands-on learning are what we're trying to incorporate here. And so thinking about it from a programmatic standpoint and getting the teachers involved in how the learning standards are going to be implemented and how behavioral improvement BIP plans can be supported by having this type of work so that we're not coming at it as trying to beg the district to do some greening because we believe in it for climate purposes, but also for the health of the children and for it's serving an educational purpose. And so that's a little bit, I just wanted to share a little bit about what we've been doing. So right now we're in an interesting place where our initial design came in about 3 times over the budget that we have allotted for it, but we are hoping to set up a project where we can be getting local foundations to contribute like $100,000 to different schools to be doing a self-help project. So we're sort of going outside of the district for now and trying to make this happen in partnership with them or showing them how we can do it. And then hopefully looking for that institutionalized process for creating green schoolyards in the future. So I'll just pause there and see if anybody has questions.
So, Ali, perfect timing, and thank you for that. You actually hit on the second guided question perfectly, but does anyone have a specific question for Ali? All right. So if you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat, raise your hand for Ali or any of the other speakers. I think we're good on timing, but I'm going to run through some of the guided questions we have and just let the presenters take it and run with it in whatever direction you want to go. And so I think, David, you mentioned this question was put in the chat. I missed it, but or a similar question. And it is extreme heat and lack of access to green space often overlap with other historic inequities. How can communities identify where investments are most needed and ensure that residents most affected by extreme heat have a meaningful role in shaping those investments? So that is open to any of the presenters who may want to address that.
I can start. We've supported, and I know many of our partners have supported community engagement processes in developing green schoolyards. And the first thing you can do, like if you're working at a district-wide level, is take a look at park equity maps or other kind of maps that show where the need is greatest. And that's usually calculated on a measure of how far they are from a park or a green space of some sort. But there are other measures you can use, right, to know which, and often we do know which schools have the least access to all sorts of resources. So starting with those is one way, but then actually having a community engagement process built in to where they're helping design the space, youth in particular, including, in fact, I was on one of these webinars last summer. I wasn't a part of it, but I was watching it. And somebody, I can't remember who it was, but one of the organizations in Los Angeles at the elementary level actually worked with youth for some of the design elements and had this really cool process built out to do that. Now, obviously, working with high school youth is probably a bit easier, but really listening for what do they want, what's possible, where might funding come in, all those sorts of things, including them in both the design from the beginning to the end of the process. So not just having them come in once, but having them circle back as the plans get developed, having them circle back when construction's starting, circle back with them, whether that's community members or youth at the end of the project. So we have lots of examples, and I know our partners do as well for this. Looks like Ellie came off mute, so I'm gonna throw it over to you.
Oh, I just wanted to say that in terms of engaging the youth, we've done some work as well there where we had the students involved in doing heat mapping of the campus. And so we sort of thought from just the interesting place of the playground being between the two fields and it being just an interesting place to do a project. Well, it turns out that that's actually also the hottest place on campus for that Choice Mead campus. And so we partnered with scientists from Scripps Institute of Oceanography over at UCSD, and the students were involved in using thermal imagers to walk around campus and do heat mapping, but also were able to witness. I don't believe that they were allowed to fly the drone, but a scientist came in with a drone and they did a vertical heat mapping to understand the vertical profile of heat from the ground to like kid level, adult level, and up higher. So we have these vertical profiles of how heat is ruminating around campus as being stagnant and holding up there. And so I think that one of the things in terms of dealing with historically disadvantaged communities, we know that the urban heat island effect because of increased concrete and reduced greening. And so one of the things that Groundwork San Diego is doing is looking at what we're calling a multiple benefit approach, which I think probably sounds obvious to a lot of us. But thinking about whenever there are proposed projects throughout the city or even in schools, like, okay, that it's not just that the project doesn't just deal with an infrastructure upgrade that's needed, like repairing the blacktop or the asphalt. Like if you're already going to be doing some sort of work, how can we add in greening components or flood abatement components to improve the overall quality of life on that space?
Yeah, that's great that you're looking at multi-benefit approaches. I put in the chat a couple tools that we developed. So we did create a map of every school in the country. and looked at it through a layer analysis to identify places with concentrations of poor health outcomes, stress outcomes, outcomes related to poor tree canopy, also places where there's been historic underinvestment, and also sort of a gap in educational outcomes. So I think there's about 40 layers in here. So I won't try to remember them all, but it assesses really through that layer analysis where the places for the greatest impact are, based on the gaps that exist and an overlay of the gaps that exist that we know schoolyards begin to solve for. So that's a really helpful tool. And we're also finding that, school districts are using it in ways to kind of map out after school programs and other places that kind of meet inequities. So it's useful. A lot of folks like that tool. So go ahead and take a look at that. There's also a user guide, and please reach out if you have any questions. To the point of having kids involved in the design process, of course, that's sort of the secret sauce of our model. And students are, they're really taking critical decisions and running with them. They're understanding that their neighborhoods are flooding, and they're understanding that, there's a combined sewer overflow issue in their city, and what even that means, because I don't think a lot of adults even know what that means. But they get it, right? And then they also are making really tough decisions about budget prioritization around the goal that they want to make their community healthier, and they want to make their community more climate resilient. So students make critical decisions all the time, and by giving them that power, it really does build on that notion that the next generation has all the tools they need, and they need a lot. And so we have to do our part to make sure they have that. And there's a really great article in the New York Times, I think from a couple weeks ago, around some of the things that happen when students are making those decisions. And so take a look at that New York Times link if you have access. It's a really sweet story. It's only about the students, and it's just wonderful work. So thank you for that question.
And I can hop in real quick, just real quick, sorry. So in Chicago is working on developing a heat vulnerability index, which doesn't just take into account how hot it gets in certain areas, but also how are people positioned to respond, and what is the resiliency of communities in relation to heat. So that is currently being developed, and community input has been an important part of that process and how things are measured. I have a colleague on the line that could potentially add more information about that. But yeah, that's an interesting thing that's coming out. And our team is hoping to really take that into account in terms of selecting schoolyards and also designing them. Just as some data that we can point to advocate for different schools. And then, as I mentioned, Space to Grow is heavily a flood response program with these other co-benefits. And so we do hope to really, right now they're very much designed to capture water into the ground, but we're looking into potentially standardizing how much green is in the schoolyards, how many trees, how much shade, those types of things, to really be more responsive to heat.
I love all of that. And Ali, I particularly love the kids doing the heat mapping. So they're doing, it's an experiential learning exercise while they're also, as Danielle said, making decisions about the spaces that they're learning in. So amazing examples by everybody. Kitty, help me out. Did we get the question from Rachel asked that's highlighted?
No, we didn't. So that would be wonderful if we want to shift into that real quick. So I think there's an opportunity to combine a question here where Rachel has asked, do you have challenges working with the school districts versus individual schools to make changes? And then an additional question around how, and I'll drop this in the chat so you see it too, or you could scroll up in the chat and see it. How are these schools' grounds maintained? And then Malda also asked a question, how can we make connection with the school district if we see the potential? So if anybody has insight on those questions, that would be great.
Yeah, I think there's some really great questions being asked in the chat. One that Rachel asked about the differences at the school level and the school district level, I think are really important and really nuanced, right? So it's the answer to this, I think, is important to consider around equitable lenses and thinking about, there is always a squeaky wheel in one of the schools or many of the schools within a school district. And those parents are going to lift up their voice, and they might even have the resources to pull together a project on their own. And that's fantastic. That's great. We find that working with the school district, you're able to really think about equity and make sure that the work is happening in the places that don't have the squeaky wheels, calling up the school board and so forth. So we really encourage folks to work at the school district level. But once those sites begin to be selected around the equitable outcomes, make sure that they actually meet the needs of the schools. Some schools are maybe not ready, or they need a little bit more support before they can go into the phase of greening their schoolyards. And so it's important to be patient. Not every site selected through a sort of a, decision support tool is the right place to work in at that moment. But when a place is selected that requires additional support, meet them where they are. Spend the extra time, build the trust, do extra engagement, identify capacity that is hiding because there's capacity there, you just don't know, and so it might mean a teacher, it might mean a community champion that's, a couple houses away. But there are folks who really care about this work. We just kind of have to spend the time to find them and bring them in and then support them, which might even mean, bringing them in as a paid community organizer. But there are so many ways to lift up local expertise if you do begin with an equitable approach and then follow through with the process that it requires.
I can hop in as well. Yes, there are challenges. And there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle when it comes to maintenance that's required. For our schoolyards, we don't just have, a rain garden. We also might have an edible garden. We might have the turf field, permeable pavers, a playground, a lot of different things that require different types of expertise. And I think we've come an extremely long way. I think the design is a major part of that. In our first year, there's one school where we just gave them like a huge prairie and they were not ready for that level of maintenance. Like it's huge, y'all. It's like half a block. And so now we're designing with that a little bit more in mind in terms of what is realistically manageable for people. And as mentioned before, we want these spaces to be learning opportunities rather than, oh man, I gotta be out there for like 3 hours weeding. Where we want stewardship in that ownership for sure, but we also want it to just be like a joyful space. And I think developing the connection with this organization, it's called A Safe Haven, that comes once a month to do that weeding that really sometimes requires like a certain level of plant identification and different methods that has really transformed that aspect of the maintenance. But we're constantly learning. Our new thing that we're investigating is these permeable pavers. So it's a constant evolution process. We've also been doing these trainings with engineers and building managers and facilities staff at Chicago Public Schools, and making sure that they're aware of the fact that these schoolyards are a form of flood resistant infrastructure that, if maintained correctly, will serve in their benefit in the long term. And I think that's been really helpful because a lot of folks who are tasked with taking care of these spaces didn't even really know what it was for. So, we're constantly building relationships and troubleshooting things. But yeah, it's a long journey.
All right, so we have 3 minutes left. 90 minutes flew by. I have learned so much. It's been an amazing conversation. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for the engaged audience and very thought-provoking questions. I do want to give each of the panelists a moment, 45 seconds to a minute. We may go a little bit over just to give a closing thought. And I really want that to focus on what's one takeaway, one action that folks could take. We heard about all kinds of issues, all kinds of solutions, but where to start broadly for folks. And before that, do want to give a reminder about evaluations on the webinar. This has been recorded, so it will be available. And then all the resources we have tried to capture in the link. And also, please, if you're not on the listserv for the work group or the American Beautiful for All Coalition as a whole, please reach out to one of us to do so. But with that, I want to give each of our panelists a round of applause. Thank you, and opportunity for a closing thought. And I don't know where we want to start. Maybe I'll just go alphabetical. We'll start with Allie.
Well, I can't wait to watch the recording to see the first half, the first hour. I'm really excited to be in this space, and just a lot of it is pilot work, right? A lot of what we're doing is figuring it out together, and so learning from each other. So I'm really grateful for like the organizing work that Trust for Public Lands does, and the Green Schoolyards of America and folks. And so I'm excited to be getting to meet more people. An action step that I would say is understanding the reality of volunteer groups. Is there a PTA? Is there a local faith-based organization? Is there a workforce development program? Is there a high school internship? Is there a landscape training workforce program? Are there folks that you can engage in supporting? And then as well, thinking about the kids as lots of many hands that can make light work in certain aspects. Of course, there are certain things that kids can't do and you shouldn't be asking them to do. But when you have that sort of responsibility to take care of your plant or to take care of your garden, it can also produce a lot in terms of personal growth. And sort of thinking about that. I know we all have to live within the reality of state testing and learning standards, but I think that the like Montessori and the ideas of teaching to a whole child versus a book of learning standards can really help us think about this type of work.
Thank you. Danielle Dank.
Yeah, we go kind of far in the alphabet to figure out who's next. Yeah, I mean, I will say the next thing that you can do right now, if you have 2 seconds to do it, is to follow the link that David just put in the chat. And not only sign on to endorse the Revitalizing American Schoolyards Act, but share it through your networks. And then, so that's a quick action. And then a longer term action, if you do see a schoolyard that has potential and you want to be involved in being that local champion, that advocate, I did also put a link into the chat on how to create a community schoolyard. It walks you through, I think we have 48 steps identified. I was told by my marketing team we have too many steps. But we tried to make this something that people could pick up off the shelf and take if they're really motivated. And of course, we're here to help. And then, lift up your voice and continue to lift up your voice for the children. By being here today, you are already committing to that. So we encourage you to take those next steps. And, this greening of schoolyards momentum is only going to be as strong as we all are inclusive. So please join us. And I also, Allie, would love for you to join some of our learning networks and share more about your great work. And of course, Danielle too, and David, we're already talking. So just a wonderful group here. Thank you so much for having space today.
Thank you. Danielle Russell.
I had a feeling I was next. Just really quickly, I think reminding ourselves that this work of green schoolyards is a form of climate resiliency, and that climate resiliency doesn't have to be all doom and gloom all the time or something that's super overwhelming, but something that can embody joy. And really inviting people into that, because I think a lot of times people get overwhelmed with what to do. And it doesn't have to be how many trees you planted, but how are you activating your local schoolyard? Maybe you're playing chess with your homeboys, in the schoolyard, just making that space come alive. All of those things, I think, make us more resilient to climate change.
Love, joy, always joy. David, the last word is yours, sir.
Well, yes, just as Danielle said, click those actions on Revitalizing America's Schoolyards Act. And just quickly, the other thing I'd say, if your own community schoolyard isn't something you feel like you're in the position to support or to get involved with, think about public policy in your state legislatures as well. And I'm here anytime to support you in that and connect dots.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you again to the presenters for all of the wealth of knowledge, resources, information, and very succinct and compelling closing thoughts. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for watching when we get 1 million views on YouTube. And so again, just thanks to everybody. Enjoy your Thursday evening. Get outside, and this is the beginning of a conversation. We'll keep this going. So thank you, everybody. Have a great one.
Thank you.